The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. Hey everybody, welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm your host, Laura Hayes, joined by
Bridget Sahlberg.
and it is the holiday season. It's upon us, Bridget. I feel like it came fast this year, but I'm also just so jammed.
It always comes quickly and it always flies by too quickly too.
Yeah. Speaking of quick, I feel like we're also flying through this season. I feel like we are just flying along through these episodes, and we are kind of in a journey amongst the parents that we have been interviewing, and today is no different. So I got to interview Jessi, otherwise known as the mom to two amazing Gestalt language processors, and you can find her on Instagram with Siblings on the Spectrum. That's Siblings on the Spectrum. And I love their entire family, but I will say that her son, who is a full-time AAC user, has a special place in my heart. And I just think they do a phenomenal job of highlighting the strengths of both their kids and how much their journey with Gestalt language processing has helped their kids' language and their overall connection with the world just kind of blossom.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I'm just wondering, could you kind of share any tips for other parents or for SLPs and teachers who are curious about how they could incorporate or coach parents on how to help GLPs learn through, using routines, using household everyday things that are easy to access?
Yeah, I think that it can feel daunting, right? So I think the way to, similarly to how we talk about building AAC and routines at home, is start with a few things and make and just model without expectation. So I think this is no different. There are some resources that we can put in the show notes for some free resources on routines that include gestalts, but just things like we know that people leave the house, right? So thinking about a let's go, modeling just let's go when you're getting ready to leave. It's time for dinner around some of those meal times, or it's time for bed. And knowing that those, it really depends on what stage they're in, right? But if they're an early Gestalt language processor in stage one or stage two, building some of those Gestalts around their routines, I think can be really helpful. And also just we know consistency helps. We know that those routines are meaningful to them, and a lot of our autistic students learn through routines. And I think is there anything else you would add?
No, I would say just make it manageable. And also, it helps to sit down and, like, as a team, kind of organize what are we going to model. But I think that that's a great idea to just kind of naturally go through because a lot of those same gestalts could be transferable to school too.
Yeah, and it still goes back to connection and tuning in to how they're already communicating. And that leads us into this interview because Jessi does an amazing job of honoring all forms of communication and just honoring all the interests in her kids. And so I'll let her talk about it more. Let's lead into our interview with Jessi from Siblings on the Spectrum. Welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm one of your hosts, Laura Hayes, and today I have Jessi Brown here, otherwise known as Lyla Buddy's mom, but I have to introduce her by name because she's amazing and doing amazing things. But let's just start off by saying welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I want everybody to know you as well as I've gotten to know you. Let's just dive in. Let's talk about your path and your background with AAC as a parent. What's that look like?
No background, no training, nothing. We've received no training on how to utilize it. We were given a device at the very start of COVID. So we just had to figure it out on our own. We picked it up at the school board's office They gave us, no evaluation, no evaluation to see like what AAC language might be best for him or anything like that. They just gave us a tablet with Proloquo to go on it, no resources. His speech therapist at the time had zero familiarity with AAC, so it was incredibly overwhelming for us.
Yeah. I mean, you weren't set up for success, it sounds like.
And you can't really blame them in a way because it was a pandemic, a global pandemic.
Yep.
So, but it was hard not to feel a little frustration towards them because, there is technology. They could have tried to make some type of effort to have some type of virtual meeting with us to set us up at least a little bit, or say, hey, here's someone who can help you. Here's our specialist, our tech specialist, or whoever. But we just kind of were just, here you go. And okay, we're doing this.
And I know even more background, but for someone who's brand new to Buddy's story, you actually have two kids that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but gestalt language processors. This whole season is about gestalt language processing, and you have two amazing children, Lyla and Buddy. And do you want to take it from there? Like, how would you describe your lovely children?
So Lyla is a year older than Buddy, and as you said, they are both gestalt language processors. I will say that Lyla does use vocal speech, as you know. She always spoke using echolalia. She was fully echolalic her first few years of life, and actually was the reason we ended up getting her evaluated for autism as well. They both were diagnosed the same day, and I took such a deep dive into learning about echolalia from there, but I really had never heard anything about gestalt language processing until I happened to see something on Instagram. Less than 3 years ago, I want to say. And I quickly realized that without even knowing it, we had been teaching Lyla language using the framework of natural language acquisition, which went completely against what we were highly advised to do by all of their medical specialists and every speech therapist she had. It never sat right with me, to ignore or even worse, extinguish her echolalia, because it was just such a huge part of who she was. So I just didn't feel right shutting it down, but we not only acknowledged, my husband and I both not only acknowledged those scripts that she had, all of her echolalia, but would join in on it. And we connected with her. We've always both been super, super close with her. And that connecting with her based off of her scripts, her favorite scripts, was really what connected her to us the most, I would say. So then we would start to mitigate her favorite scripts. Again, no clue that we were doing something right based off of this foundation that we learned later. But we had no idea there was a name for it. Come to find out, we had naturally gotten her from like 99% echolalia all the time, through to a solid stage 4, when I happened to come across meaningful speech online on Instagram. So I went down that rabbit hole of gestalt language processing, and I couldn't believe what I was learning. Everything was starting to make sense. Everything started to click. I immediately started the 20-hour parent course, and in less than a year, Lyla went from being kind of stuck in stage 4 to breezing right through to stage 6, self-generating with like flourishing grammar. It was so fast. So of course, as I learned more and more, I recognized that her brother, Buddy, the year younger, was also a GLP, because once his fine motor skills were strong enough for him to be at the point to use his thumb to swipe, to rewind, he loved looping those certain scenes over and over. So when we started implementing the same framework for him, just obviously a little bit different, because it's a whole other story with non-speaking kids, obviously. But we started seeing his eyes just really light up, in a whole new special kind of way. And we started taking note of which scripts he would be rewinding and playing over and over again. We would start scripting those out for him throughout the day. We would try to fit it with the scenarios of the day. And that just really made such an impact on him more than anything, especially songs. He's obsessed with music. Both my kids are. So doing that a lot really it seemed like his cognitive reception started to grow, but really it wasn't so much that as it was just us communicating him in the way that his brain processes language, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, so we've gotten to the point now with him that I would say his expressive language, his expressive communication using his AAC device is typically on a 3, 4 sometimes. He kind of he goes back and forth, but he uses isolated words without a lot of grammar, if any, usually. It still seems to really love, and I know he always will love when we speak to him in those stage 1 and stage 2 gestalts. Like you guys and Alex in Meaningful Speech always says, once a GLP, always a GLP. That is, I know that will be true for my kids, both of them. But he does seem to be able to understand or receive more stage 3 statements from us more and more. So I know he'll always enjoy the looping, but as far as, functional communication goes, I know that he could possibly stay in those first 3 phases, 3 or 4 stages, the rest of his life. We always try to presume potential, and it's of course possible. He may get to the point where he's generating fully structured sentences with all the appropriate grammar, which is why with LAMP Words for Life that we have with him, we started off. It was so important to us to not remove any buttons, to go in fully robust as is recommended by everyone who knows AAC.
Right.
That we just presume potential, presume competence, and let it grow with him, and just always just start it off that way, right? So even though we would be totally just super thrilled if he ever got to that point of using, adverbs and articles and conjunctions and all of that proper grammar, we really couldn't care less,
right,
if he never did, because sometimes I'll be giving support to like another parent in my DMs or something, and they're concerned about being stuck in a stage, and that's definitely a concern, and that they should work with the speech therapist on for sure. But I always tell them that I remind them how American Sign Language is not a word for word translation of English and does not have the same grammar rules, and it's fully accepted, always has and always will be fully accepted as an honorable language. So if your child doesn't show ability or even preference to ever get to those higher stages as a GLP, but they are able to effectively communicate what they need, that's their language. So it's up to us to honor and support that as the valid communication that it is. So it took a little while for me, honestly, to kind of accept that, because I was very, like I said, I was going down that meaningful speech rabbit hole, the GLP rabbit hole. I'm like, okay, this is where he's at. We got to get him to the next stage.
Right.
So I've more and more so lately accepted how amazing it is that he's gotten to where he's gotten now. And if he's always there at that isolated, stage 3 isolated words, I'm so grateful. I'm good.
Yeah. And it comes back to, I think, Jessi, just that idea of what is your autonomous thought? Are you able to communicate that autonomous thought to someone else? And, in those early stages, it might not be flexible, but what we want for anyone when we're social communication partners, for them to be able to see that they are understood and accepted for however they're communicating. I love your example about sign language. The one I usually use is texting, because think of how many times we shorten or we abbreviate or we use our own text jargon, and it's fully accepted. It's not proper grammar. I'm not using, how many times do we use adverbs when we're texting someone? Like hardly ever, right? Even when we were just messaging back and forth. I'm just liking it. I'm using
Yeah.
emojis. I am not sending fully perfect grammar when I'm doing that. And yet it's fully accepted. So the other thing you mentioned earlier that is, I think, so important for someone, maybe a parent or an SLP or someone that's thinking about, well, how do I know they're a GLP, right? Like with Lyla, you knew because you were hearing those scripts. But with Buddy, you mentioned rewinding those media clips, and thinking through, okay, this is probably something that means something to him. He's learning from this. Any other signs that you saw that he was likely a Gestalt language processor before I have one other thing I want to jump to.
Yeah. What, as you were asking that, the thing that popped in my mind was, again, his love of music and just rhythm. So if he was watching, even before he was able to loop on an iPad or a phone, if he was watching a movie on the TV, he could watch a movie once, maybe twice. And I started noticing that the next time he watched it, if there was a thematic part that was just like an action, like a big action, something goes across the screen, or something like that, or an explosion or whatever, he just was really, really obsessed, just so he loved so much to get up as close to the TV as he could right before the moment and do that, unintelligible to us, like, right when it was happening. And he did that throughout the movie, and we couldn't believe he had only seen it once before, but it was just very I don't know if intonation is the right word for this situation, but just that love of intonation he's always had, and the love of just
It was almost an anticipation. Yeah, he
yeah,
was anticipating. It was almost a predictable anticipation of
and it
something's
just,
coming.
yes, and would just scratch his brain in just the perfect way. It was really, really cool to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just always things that we look back on after we started learning about GLP stuff. We were like, yeah, yep,
Uh-huh.
that too. But in the moment, we just didn't even, think twice
It's
about it as far as
well,
that.
and sometimes like we talked about this because when I got to meet Buddy, something he did, I'm gonna just mention it here because it gives me goosebumps every time. And it's like, oh, it's just so special. I will never forget this because I met him and I had my device with me and he did not have his device at the time. We were talking, so I was talking to mine and he didn't have something he wanted to say. He had a customization he didn't want to say. But then I was like, well, let me show you my kids on my phone. And so he goes through my photos on my phone and he finds, I mean, because I don't delete my photos. So I have thousands of photos and videos on my phone. And he scrolls through really, really quickly. Within 3 seconds, he finds this one video of my daughter. And in the corner of the, like, so a fourth of a tiny
Yeah.
little icon, he found the one where she was jumping on my bed watching Little Mermaid. And he put it on. And so I was like, oh my God, yes, I totally forgot that she loves Little Mermaid too. And so we just had this lovely little exchange about Little Mermaid. And so that was how he was communicating to me because he is a huge Disney fan, amongst other things, but he's a huge Disney fan. So one might have thought, before we knew about Gestalt language processing, before we knew about NLA, that was completely coincidental. And now I know for a fact that he was like, oh, let me see if there's something on here we can talk about.
Which, by the way, side note, my husband felt terrible. He ran out of the hotel room to bring me a coffee because he knew I was struggling that morning. And he was like, oh, and he didn't even think. And so he felt terrible. And obviously I was like, it's fine. It was 2 seconds. But he knows that it's not fine, even if it's 2 seconds. And so but he was so apologetic. He was like, and of course we ran into the AAC like guru of the conference the one time. So I'd like to point out that Bill, my husband, I think he's better than me. I think he should be the one doing this interview with you because he is absolutely amazing when it comes to AAC. And I feel like I had to throw that in there because I felt terrible for him for how bad he felt in that moment. But he is so, that is a huge, huge, huge reason that Buddy has made such amazing progress with his device is because of Phil, because LAMP is not my favorite. I've mentioned it like jokingly on my social media. It's so hard, and I want other parents to know that it's relatable. It is hard. It can be really hard. I feel like a lot of people say you either love it or hate it. You either are able to easily process it, how it works, or you're not. And I'm not good with LAMP. It is a constant struggle for me. But it clicks a lot easier for him. So thank goodness.
And we didn't touch on this yet. This is what I wanted to come back to.
Yes.
We started with Proloquo.
Yeah,
and
we're all over the place, and that's probably my fault.
No. I think this is exactly what I think a lot of people experience though. Well, no, they do. Like you start with one system and it, for whatever reason, doesn't click, doesn't work. So what did that look like? You guys moved over to LAMP.
Yeah, we started with Proloquo because I think that the school at the time he was in before the pandemic happened, Proloquo was just, that was what they were just doing for every kid. There was no assessment for any kid. Like it was just like, it was automatic, it was the default. So, which that's understandable. That's one of the more, I mean, I would venture to say that might be the most popular one. But we were so overwhelmed by it in the first place because we didn't have any idea how to implement it. So to be completely honest, we did not utilize it or model it very strongly early on, which caused a lot of confusion for everybody. And then of course, dysregulation because on both parts, us and Buddy, because for example, just so many mistakes that we made because we weren't set up for success. We had no idea what concept to use when setting it up and personalizing it. We tried to find stuff on YouTube, but years back, there was nothing like there is now. So it was slim pickings what we could find on YouTube and Google. So we just kind of had to do a trial and error for the most part. We did find a few things here and there online and just we were thankful for, but for example, we didn't know for the longest time that there was even a feature to search for a word and have it show you where it is. So we're trying to model language to Buddy and spent so much time ourselves trying to remember, oh gosh, where is this word? And then we're like, oh, Buddy, hold on, wait, just 1 second. Where? And then he's like, come on, I don't have time for this, you know?
Yep.
So the dysregulation, like we weren't doing any of us any favors. There wasn't really a lot of progress. We were so proud of him for the few things that he did progress with Proloquo. It's an important part of our journey. It was a very important part of our journey. That's where we started. It was better than nothing, 100%. But we started noticing kind of a plateau kind of happened, and he just was only using it for food for the most part, just his snacks that he wanted, whatever he wanted to eat, just those very basic wants or needs. So we ended up getting an AAC evaluation and training from people who were able to give us additional resources. They did the assessment across the country. We're in Virginia. It was a content creator actually on Instagram. She's called AAC and me. She's out in California, and she hooked up with more local to us in DC, Bumblebee pediatric therapy. And so online, in the course of a couple months, we didn't like run it to the ground. We wanted to be thorough and gradual, so we didn't kind of burn Buddy out with the trial, but we did it here and there. And virtual was obviously difficult, but they sent us an iPad, and then we used our iPad, we used ours, and we kind of put the data together and set up a camera, and they watched how he observed him and how he responded to different apps and stuff. So I was hoping that he would not gravitate towards LAMP. I was like, no. But
anything but like, this one.
Without a doubt, that is what he just so like quickly gravitated towards, and he just picked it up so quickly. And it's that motor planning aspect of it for him. So, but that was definitely the turning point with us, and how we got to LAMP was doing the AAC assessment. And I do know, I will strongly urge parents, if they are able, if there's someone in their area that does it through their insurance, or if they are able to financially afford it, I strongly encourage it. But I do know that it's a huge privilege. I mean, we put it on our credit card, but that's still a privilege. So I know it's not always easy to do, but if a family happens to be able to afford doing an AAC assessment, that is what the turning point was for us. And finding out that Pro Lipo to Go was just not his language, wasn't his native tongue. LAMP was, unfortunately.
Or fortunately, because he's soaring on it. And here's what I love about the fact that he did choose LAMP, as hard as those symbols are. So if someone is listening and they're not familiar, one of the reasons why LAMP can be confusing to many different people, LAMP Words for Life was created by Bruce Baker and is with this fancy term called semantic compaction, which just basically means the pictures are metaphoric and have multiple meanings so that all vocabulary, all of the thousands of words available, are within 2 to 3 hits. And so that means that, the little frog has to mean go and jump. And so it doesn't make sense to those of us that are looking, but the motor plan piece is so essential to quickly being able to say what you want. But what I love about it, Jessi, is the fact that it is LAMP Words for Life is almost exclusively a single word based system. And so people come to me and they're like, oh, well, it's a GLP. We need SNAP because it's got a phrase based system. And I'm like, that's not what we need to be thinking about. We need to be thinking about what features does our AAC user benefit from. That needs to be the very first question. And for Buddy, it's motor planning. And his language is LAMP. So what, if any, customizations or modifications have you guys done to his system?
Yeah. So we have added many of his favorite movies and characters from those movies, and imported the images of those characters directly into the program. The men speak symbols in the library are good. There are times when with customizations, obviously, that they can be confusing or don't represent the piece of language in a way that Buddy would be familiar with. So for those customizations, we'll add our own images with the camera or from images on the internet. It just creates a much clearer and more robust library for him to make it more specifically tailored to him. We also have included pictures of his family or close friends that he's able to, so he can identify them himself on his device. For example, instead of just putting what's already on there by default is mom, dad, brother, sister. So actually on that page, that family page, next to that default mom button, we have a mama button, which is a picture of me. So he can say mom just as a noun in the future, or if he wants to be more specific, he'll say mama, which is me. And then next to dad is a picture of his dad. And then next to sister is the Lyla button. It's a picture of Lyla. And then actually a few weeks back, we loaded our luggage in the car for a trip. And when we got in and got on the road, Buddy said, Mima, and when I say said, I know you know this, but just FYI for any listeners, Buddy's completely non-speaking. So when I say said, that I mean with his device. So he said Mima, which is his word for grandma, my mom. And he knew we were going on a trip, obviously, with the luggage, and we had talked about it and stuff, but we never know for sure what he's listening to or what he's tuning out. But he knew where he wanted to go. He wanted to go to Mima's house. And we were going to see her, but we weren't going to her house. We were going to see her at a different location. But he clearly had remembered from the night before, where I was like, at nighttime, tomorrow we're going to wake up in the morning. First, we're going to do this, and then this, and we're going to get in the car, and we're going to go down to this hotel, and Mima and Uncle Sam and Uncle Jake will be there. And so, and he remembered Mima. And so he pressed Mima, and instead of just saying, grandmother or grandma, I can't remember which one is the default, grandma or grandmother for LAMP, he has Mima there next to it. So it just allows him to have obviously that more meaningful communication. and allows us to clearly, delineate between a generic family relation as a noun, mother, father, uncle, cousin, and his personal family, when we do progress to the point of teaching him that aspect of language. So it's very gradual for sure. And my husband and I both beat ourselves up about how we need to do more, we need to like make a goal of like adding like 10 words a day and we sit down every, but we're trying to give ourselves a little bit more grace because the progress that he has made is tremendous. But that's definitely a huge goal of ours for this upcoming homeschool year is, okay, actually what we've been doing lately is we have a whiteboard on our fridge. And whenever we think of a gestalt or a button that we want to add to his device, we'll just write it down. Because realistically, my biggest struggle with LAMP, with the fact that it is motor based or motor planning based, is I'm such an overthinker in general in life, but I'm such an overthinker about where to put a novel button. I don't want to get it wrong because once it's there, it's there. Like it's going to grow. We want it to grow with him. So because it's a motor planning thing, we don't want him to have to relearn it later in the future. That's not, what we'd ever want to do and put him through that. So I'll tell Phil, my husband, like, oh, should I put this over here or should I put it in this button? He's like, and so lately he's like, both. Put it both. If you're absolutely not sure, put it in both. Because he loves to navigate the new buttons and he just lights up. He's like, ooh, what do we got here? And he'll see that it's in both and maybe he'll decide where he wants to hit for that, request. So I'm trying not to drive myself too crazy because the problem is when if I do overthink it a little too much, then the issue becomes that I don't put it in at all.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I'll get to that. I'll get to it later. And it just gets on the back burner. So I've got to be better about either putting it in right away and just going with my gut of where it should be, or writing it down. And I think the best part is writing it down. I can have a handful and then put it in later that night, because my husband he's been really great about using, there's a specific tool that he uses and I'll be able to think of it in a second. That, and maybe you know the name of it. AAC Lab.
Language Lab. It's AAC Language Lab,
yeah,
where you can use the smart charts to help you get.
So that has been super helpful.
Good.
He's better at that than I am. So the strategy that we have been taking more lately is just, okay, write it down on the whiteboard and then put it in a handful, 5 or 10 buttons at a time, and can maybe kind of look at that resource and see if we can kind of make sense of, oh, you know what? Yep, let's put it over here.
So Jessi, we didn't talk about this, but I'm curious what your response might be to someone, because you're doing something that I often tell families or teams to do when it comes to any AAC user, which is making sure we tap into the customizations and the personalizations on a system that are important to them. But what would you say to someone who said that, because this is something that has been circulating, that we shouldn't be customizing or personalizing a device without AAC user consent? And how would we know, we should just be using the words that naturally exist within the system until they can consent to us that, they want these additional phrases, gestalt, words, et cetera, on the device?
Yeah. I mean, how can we practice what we preach with that model if we're not modeling? Like, we have to have something to model. So I would say if they really feel strongly about it, obviously every child is different. Every parent knows their child better than anyone. So even though we always want to presume competence, we want to presume potential. But to me, I feel like sometimes that phrase gets a little bit, can be a little bit pushed to the extreme, because in my opinion, my humble opinion, a part of presuming competence is is us accepting where the child is at right now. And presuming potential does not mean that they know it all right now, but they have the potential of learning it all, of learning infinite things. So we also just have to keep in mind that our children do have, my son is disabled, and that's not a bad word. He has a disability. So whether he has an intellectual disability or not, we don't really know, or whether it's just a matter of the fact that he's a gestalt language processor and he processes things differently, but he's hearing it all. We don't really know quite yet. And I hope that in the future, he can tell us everything that we don't know right now. But for now, my job, in my opinion, my job is to give him as robust of a vocabulary as possible. And so it can be tricky for sure. And I totally understand and respect that concern. I think that it's really just the nuances of each specific situation. If Buddy is slapping my hand away as I'm creating a word, then obviously I'm going to want to say, okay, this is a good sign. This is a good sign. He is expressing like, this is my voice, this is my words. So then I'm not going to use his. I'm going to show him, okay, well then I'm going to use mine, and I'm going to have my own tablet if possible, or my phone or whatever, and I can add it on there, and then it can all register when you do it automatically and input it. So, or when he's asleep, I don't know, however it works for your child. But ultimately, I don't know. I personally haven't heard of that, and I find it surprising because obviously if he is pushing me away, I'm not going to be like, no, this is for your own good, give it to me. But you're going to find ways to work around it. So also, one thing that I love the idea of is, which we have not done, and I was just thinking actually a week or two ago, needs to go on the board, which it hasn't. So
well,
but
let me add one tiny thing
yeah.
to that thought, because it's something that I witnessed with Buddy, which is that when he didn't have access to his customizations that you guys had watched and gotten curious and observed, and you were just willy-nilly adding these personalizations and these things that you thought he might want to say. You were very observant and very meticulous, and like, this is the clip that he's rewinding, or this is the family member's name that he is surrounded by, and he would have in context, and he'd be hearing it in context. When he had my device, when he didn't have access to those customizations, he motor planned to the page and then stopped because he didn't have access to the words that he could use to connect with me. And so you're just using them as a connection point. And that's kind of what I hear you saying, is you're just honoring his autonomy. If he were to indicate in any way that he was not happy with where you put it, or he wasn't happy with you putting anything new on his device, you would honor that.
We would know it, because he grunts when he's not pleased. He stomps. We call him a little baby deer sometimes because he stomps when he's like frustrated we didn't do something right. So we would investigate it. We would get to the bottom of it and try to figure it out until he stopped grunting or stomping at us. But also, I know some have mentioned this before, but one thing that I really, really want to add to his tablet is a let's add it button. That would be such a tremendous, and I don't know if it would click for him immediately, but if we model it enough for him in the future, I would love for him to understand that, okay, there's no button for that, let's add it. And then he can kind of get used to, okay, this is what she's doing. This is, she's not trying to tell me we're going to do that. She's actually adding a button for something that I love and really want to have accessible to me. So that is something that is on my checklist that I need to add. And I think it would be a super, super awesome idea for anybody, LAMP or any other language app. That's a really great script to put in.
I love that. I love that as good advice, just in general, just to kind of increase that self-advocacy and that autonomy. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to add phrases especially for self-advocacy and efficiency. What about So that's a great piece of advice. What about any other advice you might have for somebody working with either LAMP Words for Life or GLP AAC users?
I would say that um, so let's see, let me think, because I think we touched on, I don't want to repeat myself. Because I feel like the largest benefit of LAMP obviously is the motor planning aspect of it, because there's no scrolling, the buttons stay in the same place. It's accessing language. It becomes that defined path of buttons that doesn't vary once it's learned. So the thing is, though, is a lot of times for Buddy, he'll often stem by repeatedly, which I love this, repeatedly accessing a piece of language over and over again, trying to go get faster each time. It's almost like he is rehearsing the motion to be able to access that desired piece of language inherently. It's actually super cute. And Lyla says it's her favorite stem that Buddy does. So sometimes another parent or a worker at school or outside of the school might find that to be distracting if they're just like stimming with it, playing the same thing over and over, or like what he's doing, which basically, like, here's my phone, like if this is his tablet, he's doing this like over and over and over. And it's so funny and cute, but I really think that maybe it's just a visual stim, I don't know, but I think that it seems that he is literally rehearsing that motor planning for that command. And so I would just say one important thing is to not try to stop that stimming from happening, because you never truly know. We can't get really inside his head, so we don't really truly know exactly the reason why that child is doing that stim. It could be for enjoyment, could be for regulation, or it could be trying to get that that hit down. So I can definitely see a lot of parents or staff feeling like that might be a distraction. So I would say to really watch out for parents, to kind of watch out for staff members that might be concerned. Make it clear to them, or vice versa, make it clear to the parent that this is okay. They're learning their language. Like, just picture a child who really, really wants to learn Spanish, and they're just randomly saying computadora, or like educación, just randomly, and it doesn't make sense to you, but you're not going to say, stop it, don't do that. That's not the appropriate way to use that language. They're just kind of like, they're feeling things out, and just let it happen. Especially in the beginning, Buddy was stimming like crazy on his tablet, and it seemed like, oh, he's just using it to play. But a lot of times that ends up stopping, like for the most part, after a little while, because it's new, it's exciting, they got to check it out. So one big thing I think that's super crucial for everyone to come to agreement on is to not stop the stimming on it. And I think that it might happen even more with LAMP because it's a motor planning thing. And I think that's LAMP is probably the most beneficial, probably the app that is most beneficial to let them stim on, because it's motor plan and because they're going to get it down. It's like extra practice for them learning where everything is. So and I will say too that I mentioned the AAC language app, or language lab we talked about. I think it's important for anyone listening to mention maybe a few resources, and maybe you've mentioned some of them in past episodes that I haven't heard before. So, but I know that it can be so difficult to try to not only learn to model language, but also determine where's the appropriate place to add the novel. Like we mentioned, the novel button, the stress of getting it right that first time can be hard. So that AAC language lab is amazing. And then my husband really loves, it's a YouTube channel. She also has an Instagram. It's called the letter O, Amazing Kids AAC.
Yes, Angela Morad.
Yes,
she's been on the podcast before, so
awesome. She's got a lot of content. I think that might be my husband's favorite, it seems. And also she has good resources for the Spanish speaking community too, which has been actually has come in handy because my husband's a firefighter and he actually has communicated with a couple of different parents of non-speaking Hispanic autistic children. I know one child had a seizure, he couldn't speak, and he had no device, no way to communicate. And my husband helped her got her connected with the website for Lily's Voice nonprofit. And he checks in with her every now and then, and he dropped off like a little stuffed animal the next day and all of that when he came home from the hospital. And she couldn't believe it because she'd never heard of it. There's still so many parents that have never heard of AAC still, which is baffling, but clearly means that there's still a lot of work to do, a lot of loud advocacy to be done. So, but that is a really, really good tool, a really good resource that has helped my husband out, is that Amazing Kids. And then I know that you know all these people, but what helped us too was talking to you, obviously. I cannot sing your praises more, like enough. So yeah, all things AAC, I feel like, I assume most people listening to this already follow you, but when it comes to how much confidence that you have instilled in me and my husband with your account and talking with you personally, you should see the amount of notes that I took earlier this year at the Meaningful Speech Conference. I've learned so much from Alex, but I was really taking an insane amount of notes during your talks on AAC with Gestalt learners, because as you know, with Lyla, we were able to fine tune her language skills so much easier, which was amazing. But with Buddy, it's just so much harder to navigate this GLP thing with when the child is non-speaking. So you have been such a huge asset. So quick little shout out to you.
That's a surprise. That was a surprise. I was not anticipating that, but thank you. I mean, I was just about to say the same thing about you guys. The fact that like the impact and the waves that you were making down to, you know, he's an EMS, so it's not like something that that you would think would come up for an EMS, but it does this kinds of stuff. And you know, it's just one of those little maybe God winks, like it's kismet, you know, you're supposed to be where you are, and then you connect and make a difference and get kids a voice.
Yeah. So, and then Emily Diaz, SLP on Instagram, she put up with a lot of voice memos from me, questions way back in the beginning, like the little thing, the seemingly little things. Look back now, they seem little, but back then they weren't, like grid size, all of that, and iPad size. And she's fantastic, was a huge helpful resource for us. A friend for Lily Bug, Stephanie, she's actually become a dear friend of mine. And back when we were completely clueless and on our own, she had a lot of YouTube videos, and she when we finally found her, it was just like, oh yes, this is who can help us. So, and then, you know, she has that amazing nonprofit that I know you know about, Lily's Voice. So it was a very full circle moment for me, because I actually just recently attended my first meeting as their newest board member, and I'm so excited because it's full circle moment. Now she has helped me so much. She doesn't even realize how much she's helped me with her content, that now I hope that I'm able to give back a little bit to help however I can. And then obviously Alex with Meaningful Speech, that AAC course that you helped her with, I cannot recommend it enough. I feel like I was so empowered after the AAC portion of the course, especially because it just, again, like I said, with Lyla, I was just diving in and I was like knocking it out of the park with her. And then I felt just really lost with Buddy. Like, how do I translate this into something for a non-speaker? It was much tougher. So yeah, and the last thing I would say to anyone and everyone that has non-speakers, whether they're students or their children, as you know, AAC in general, especially with a motor planning centered program. It's a different language. It
Mhm.
has English words, it outputs English phrases, but the neurological connections feel very much like learning a different language altogether. But it's the language that works best for the kid. So in order to be able to help the child to communicate the best that they can, we got to learn it, right?
Mhm.
Like that's just what we got to do. So use it. It's so cliche, and I feel like I've said it so many times, but just use it as much as possible throughout the day, not just to like show your child, but you use it. Like you, when Buddy goes to bed, like we'll just sit there and just have a romantic evening in together. Each of us
Using the words for life as you talk about.
tapping away and just, oh my gosh. But literally that was us last night, which is funny. So
Love
just
it.
laughing, but it's actually true.
Yeah.
Like we're learning it.
Mhm.
We're learning the language. It's not just that we're trying to teach him to use it. We are learning it because we have to speak it. We have to speak his language too. So
Yeah. And just
it's,
connect, right? It's a two,
yeah,
you know, you cannot expect someone to learn a language without being integrated into their daily context of their world. And so
yeah,
it is the only time where you're learning side by side for many
yeah.
people.
We're
Yeah.
growing together. We're
Like,
growing up with him.
yes,
But
yes.
it's been so worth it though. You got to push past those struggles that we had early on. It was so hard. And it's still hard. And some days it seems really easy. And I'm like, man, we are knocking this out of the park. And then other days we feel like we are failing him miserably. And even just being asked by someone like you to talk about our experience, I just felt completely, the day that you asked me, I was like, why? I'm so underqualified.
And here I am sitting on the other side, Jessi, thinking like, I need to have her on for a part two. Like we haven't had enough time to talk about all these things that I know so many parents and teams can relate
I
to.
think it's good for parents who are hot messes to see other hot messes, and it's okay.
I think that's
And
just
it'll
parenthood
be
in
okay.
general. Isn't that just parenthood in general? Aren't we
Yeah.
all just hot messes just trying to get
We're
by?
just, no one's ever a pro at it. We just got to keep going. So
Mhm.
I'm always happy to show.
Just when you think you figured it out, things change. Yep.
Just when you think, because there's plenty, as I've mentioned, a few things here that we haven't done that I still want to do.
Mhm.
It's a never ending growth for
Mhm.
not just him, but for us. So,
Mhm.
but seeing it has been, seeing his progress and seeing him happy, his
Mhm.
meltdowns, his dysregulation just have dropped so significantly since switching to LAMP. It's been like I've made it through this whole part without crying, so I'm gonna be good. I'm fine. Hold on.
Yep, you're good. You're good.
But truly, it's been out of this world, and it's just, we can't. My husband and I both are such, like, we beat ourselves up, not each other, to each other. Like we could be doing the exact same thing, and we're like, no, you're doing amazing. But then we beat ourselves up. So I'm glad we have each other to like tell each other, remind each other, like, you're doing great, give yourself grace, But it's just thinking back to thinking on how many years we wasted, or I just, if I could go back, I guess that's one thing that I would love to tell parents who have younger non-speakers, who have professionals and family members and whoever else telling them, internet strangers, telling them to wait it out. Don't wait it out. Please don't wait it out. Because if anything, it's going, if they're meant to have vocal speech, if they're going to be able to have vocal speech, if anything, it's going to help with that, help it to come out more quickly. That studies have shown it does not hinder vocal speech. But on the flip side, if you don't do that, if you do just wait it out, then I feel like you're going to regret it, because we do. We 100% regret not starting sooner. And honestly, also, if I had known more about AAC, if I known anything about AAC back when Lyla was 2, 100% she would have had one. She would have had one, even though she was vocal. I would have had one there for her whenever she needed it. And I think that it would have helped her to progress quicker, honestly. So
Mm.
don't wait.
It's such good advice. And like,
Yeah.
I hear you saying too, it's just been such a connection point, right? It's not just about the words that you're putting on a page. It's about connecting with your child and helping them see that they don't have to struggle.
And I do want to say one more thing. As far as screen time goes, something that we really have changed in the last, I want to say, year or so, is not having such strict screen time rules for Buddy. We thought he was addicted to the screens and just obsessed with screen time. But little did we know, he doesn't just use his AAC tablet for communicating. He also uses his Play iPad that he loops different scripts and different scenes. He uses that for communication too. Some of it is just regulation, some of it is just fun. But when we actually start paying attention, we realize he is communicating. He'll bring he'll bring his Ratatouille or his iPad playing Ratatouille over to the window when it's starting to thunder. And he'll play the part in Ratatouille when he says, storm's getting closer. So it's not just his AAC tablet that is his way of communicating. He communicates by way of his other like play screen time. So when
other media.
Yeah, and I obviously every child is different. So I'm not saying like everybody needs to just let every child have unlimited screen. Of course, every kid's different, and some children might be incredibly overstimulated by specific shows or by specific, like there are a couple shows that Buddy's not allowed to watch on YouTube because it will send him into like uncontrollable, dysregulated state. And I don't want to see him struggle in that state. So we have certain things locked and blocked. And then later we'll come back and see if it does the same thing or if it was a fluke. Nope, he can't handle whatever, something about the colors combined with the sound. It's not good. So yes, regulations, every parent knows their kid. So sometimes it's going to be a trial and error thing, but what we have discovered and what I know more and more parents who are trying to be neurodiversity affirming for their non-speaking AAC users, a lot of us are realizing that these strict screen time rules are actually not as helpful as we thought. And letting them have not unlimited, but less regulated screen time for Buddy has really, really helped his overall emotional health, his happiness overall. He is so much more regulated. And he's gotten to the point where before, if we try to say, okay, pause it, no. It was almost like he couldn't let go of it because he didn't have any other way to communicate. And we didn't understand that he was like, no, like how else is he going to get words out? So we have just noticed since just kind of letting him have, for the most part, when we're at home, we try to have like a set, in the car, it's a small space. And for all of us to be regulated, we can't have the looping in the car because we want to be safe. Mommy should be a safe driver and not crazy. So in the car, he doesn't loop, but he has obviously his words at all times, and sometimes I'll script for him or whatever. But in the house, unless he's like doing some school with me or whatever, for the most part, he's got kind of free reign. And when he needs to loop, he loops. And we've realized that because of that, he has now gotten to the point now where it's not such forbidden fruit. And he's totally fine with pausing it when I ask him to now.
Yeah,
and again,
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's just okay, pauses it immediately. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do some school for a minute, or hey, let's look what's that out the window, like whatever reason, or if we want to spend some family time and we want to try and see like if he'll participate with us in something, he pauses it, no problem. To go on the potty, pause it, fine. Oh, it's time to take a bath, okay. But before, I never in a million years thought we could get to this point. And it's just ironic that it came from giving him more unlimited
more access, not less. Yeah. Oh, Jessi, I love that for you guys.
Yeah.
And I know that we could keep going.
I know.
And that's why I keep thinking we're gonna have to have a part two. Or maybe I'll just have your husband on or both of you, or I don't even know. It could be fun.
He will like want to slap me if I tell him like, hey, but he would do it in a heartbeat because honestly, he has a lot of really good input, and it's one of my favorite things lately about him that's really, really like awesome to see is just him working that, like going into settings and LAMP, and I'm like, how are you doing that so fast? Like he's amazing.
Now,
So
that's not your favorite AAC moment though. Like, yeah, I always ask everybody that comes on, what's your
yeah.
favorite AAC moment to date? So what's can't be that one, right?
I would have to say, so I don't know if I could pick a favorite. But well, this probably is my favorite. It's so simple, but for me as a mom, it's massive. So he's used the mama button before when we've modeled it. Like we'll say, like if Phil is bringing him to bed, putting him down for the night, and Phil will model like good night mama, and good night Lyla. He'll want to oftentimes do it too, so he's used the mama button. But the first time that he ever, it was just a few weeks ago actually, that he ever used it completely independently and like unprovoked, or whatever the word would be, unprompted or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
self-generated, I guess.
Yep.
Is a good way to say it.
Yep.
I had a long day running errands. I pulled in the driveway. Phil was at home with the kids. I pulled in the driveway, and I know once I walk in the door, I love my family, but once I walk in the door, it's going to be no more quiet for me. So I'm like, okay, sit. How you just sit in the driveway for a few minutes.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, you know what? I should go ahead and call this doctor's office real quick and reschedule this because I can't make a phone call in the house with the kids. So I'm on the phone and I see the curtains move, and it's just a quick phone call, but I see the curtains move, and then I see Buddy peek and like look at me through the living room window. And then like maybe a minute later, I get a text and I look at it, and it's from my husband, and it was a picture of his AAC device screen, and it said mama. And I ended that phone call. So I think he may have actually hung up on them and was like, oh, I have to call you back. And I bolted in the house to just like
love on him
all over him, whether he liked it or not. Self-autonomy, except for when I'm smothering you with kisses. You're gonna have to deal with it this time. So just the best, most amazing moment I could have possibly, and almost a decade in the making. So
yeah.
it's a bittersweet thing. It is, because I can be as affirming as a parent as I try to be and claim to be, but there is still a little bit of grief in the fact that your kid is almost 10 and still I've never heard him say mama in any way. Self-generated independently. So that was massive for me. It might seem small to some or most, but it was huge to me. I don't think I'll ever forget it. So that was just recently, and that was probably to date my favorite. And it was just one little word, and that was
not
the best
small at
sentence
all.
ever.
Not small at all. I have goosebumps. It was a great one. And, I hope there are many more to come. I do hope, I mean, I could totally see Buddy finding all the different ways to say mama to the point where you're like, okay, I get it, buddy.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, let's land the plane there because I don't think it gets better than that. We just want to thank Jessi Brown for coming on. Her kids are amazing. If you get a chance, check her out. She will put your contact info in here if people do have questions and they can follow up with you. And Siblings on the Spectrum is your account on Instagram. Give her a follow. And if you get the chance to see her again, just, you just have such wisdom and insight. So thank you for coming on today, and we'll catch everybody next time.
Thank you. Thank you for all the support you've given our family. And thanks for having me on, letting me talk to you all.
Hi, it's Bridget Solberg with another fun find for AAC Innovative Solutions. And this is called Kimochi's. And it's a little stuffed animal set with multiple stuffed animals that really explores feelings. So it has an entire feeling guide. And there are other little stuffed animals like mad or happy, sad, sleepy, frustrated, a full variety of different, more simple and complex emotions. And I really think that this would be a great activity to check out from the IRC. If you're noticing that some of your GLPs who use AAC are either needing more exposure to that, emotions vocabulary, or if they're having gestalts that aren't as understandable for unknown communicators to really understand. So if they're saying something that would be hard to decode, if they're getting mad, like, I'm not going to color today. And just the average listener to that wouldn't know that that actually means I'm mad. This could be a really fun way to play with these emotions, play with these stuffed animals. It has a book with it as well. I wasn't as big of a fan of the book just because the gestalts that you'd be modeling wouldn't be as clear and understood. But I'm imagining having a big sensory bin with all these different emotions, playing hide and seek in the classroom with the emotions, doing a scavenger hunt throughout the building with them. And then just even using these in schema play. So if you're doing like a dollhouse, having these throughout the dollhouse, having these like incorporated with like puzzle play or even like Play-Doh, like, oh, we're sleepy. Let's make him a bed. He's so sleepy. We need to get in bed now if we're sleepy, stuff like that. So really, I think that that could be super helpful for our students who need more gestalts and more modeling surrounding emotions. Again, it was Kimochi's, and you can find it in the IRC.